Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session on SAP Graph. SAP Graph is our tool to build extensions in minutes. That's a bold statement, and I'll show you where we are. We have still a long way to go in this journey, but nevertheless, we are at a point where we have something that is now in private beta, and you can work with us. And I want to give you a bit of a flavor of what's going on. Also, we have a partner here, Oliver IT, in the person of Jerome, who will talk a little bit about what they have done, because they're one of our private beta partners in Graph. From a partner perspective, how they used it and how they worked with us. But before we do that, I'll give a bit of context on what Graph is about. Today, we have almost 600 APIs in the API Hub. That's a lot more than when we initially started API Hub, but now we're at a point where we are exposing really the whole depth and breadth of SAP's LOB application portfolio in the API Hub. That's good on one hand, but on the other hand, from a developer's perspective who is maybe new to the SAP ecosystem or hasn't been around for a long time, it can be hard to find the right API for the job that he or she needs to get done. And these APIs expose the full functionalities of the underlying LOB applications. And that exposes a certain complexity in the APIs itself, which in an extension application case might not always be required. So that was the starting point why we worked on Graph as a thing that is complementary to the API Hub. And our motto here is that less is more. So we are not trying to go to 600 APIs in SAP Graph, but we want to have an approach where we have the smallest number of APIs possible in SAP Graph. And we do it in a way that the API content is curated by a central development team that makes sure that the APIs have a harmonized look and feel from a developer perspective, and that the functionality that's exposed fits together. And we do that by leaving out a lot of functionality that we have in the original LOB APIs, because we're trying to serve the 80% case, so only selected functionality makes it into the graph. Another important concept is that in SAP Graph, we don't talk mainly about the applications which serve the data, but we talk about an object model. So as you may have heard, SAP is in the process of building a virtual semantic data model that spans the main objects in the SAP portfolio, at least if you look at the 4 processes in the intelligent suite. What are the objects that get exchanged between applications? These objects are exposed at some point in Graph, not at the moment, but directionally. And then you query an object. And if a customer, for example, is served from Cloud for Customer or Sales Cloud, Commerce Cloud, or S4 Cloud, is something that SAP Graph as a routing layer on top abstracts away in that case. What SAP Graph also abstracts away is authentication. So you authenticate against Graph and not against the individual system. And in the routing layer, the respective authentication against the downstream systems is applied. We'll see that in a minute. And we'll also harmonize the syntax of the APIs. So they will all look like they're all REST APIs, which loosely resemble an OData v4 scheme in terms of how we express filters, for example, and also how we structure these APIs. Version number before object will always be consistent across everything we put in there. As I said, SAP Graph is, stands next to a couple of things that we already have, which is the API Hub, which you use if you already know what you do and you're looking for some deep functionality in one of the LOB applications. And our API management is also something that you need if you work with APIs from the API Hub and with Graph, because you still need to manage your quotas against the individual systems that at the end of the day you're connecting to. Now I wanted to show you the graph in action so that we have a better feeling for the problem that we're solving. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to the Graph API Explorer, which shows here on the right-hand side the objects that Graph currently supports, which at this point are only 4 objects: sales order, quotes, customers, and products, which is of course only a starting point. We need to have much more coverage for Graph to become widely useful. That's why we're still in private beta, but still we want to socialize the concept with you. So what we can do, for example, is the customer APIs gives us the possibility to retrieve a list of customers. I can add some query parameters using the tool. For example, I could say, give me only the top 2 results from this customer API, and now I get a result back, in this case from Sales Cloud. Now, if I copy this query and run the same thing from my terminal, you will notice a couple of things, which is, first of all, I get the same result back as in the browser, obviously, but in addition to the query that we saw in the API Explorer, I have here an authorization bearer token, which authenticates me against Graph. And this token stays the same no matter what object I'm querying. So for example, if instead of customers, I query now sales orders using the same syntactical structure of the query and the same authorization token, I now get sales orders back. In that case, from an S4 cloud system, which is connected to SAP Graph. Okay, let's do something more interesting and maybe try to create a new sales order. So here's an example body I can pass along with this post request, and let's try to create a sales order for a product that doesn't exist. This request now gets handed to S4, which says actually this material doesn't exist. So we validate actually these calls against the downstream systems. If I then now go back to a material that we have in the system, maybe put in today's date, I think it's the 9th. And when do we want this order delivered? Maybe in 4 days from now. I should be able to create this new sales order now. So now the call succeeded. You notice that a new order with the ID 111 has been created. If I can now go to the S4 system, which I have, and refresh this view, I see that this order has been created. Okay, what I also see is that the sales order has been created for a particular customer. So I can use this Graph Explorer to now build a query by clicking on this button to give me only the data for this particular customer. But I can also navigate, right? I can say, okay, instead of the information to this customer, I want all sales orders that are associated with this customer. So this is why we call it Graph, because we add this navigation across the objects that are being exposed, right? And now I could also filter them for a particular name or whatever. But what I would much rather do is invite Jeroen Jansen on stage to tell us how Oliver IT has interacted with Graph as part of our private beta experience. Welcome.
Thanks. So let me share a little bit of context why we were interested in working with SAP for this co-innovation project. So this year we're celebrating our 10th anniversary, and for the past 10 years we have been simplifying complex business processes at our customers, right? So taking a process-centric analysis, looking at the different activities done, the different personas, the data used, and any manual handovers or paper-based activities. So this simplification and automation always leads to a higher efficiency, a higher quality, but also reduces labor, which in the end, of course, saves money. So we always try to deliver a great user experience to the users of our applications, and we do this by providing the state-of-the-art UI technology. We deliver these projects in a highly interactive fashion, so something nowadays you would call agile, which we have been doing basically from the very start. Now, one of the key aspects of these applications is that we're integrating with SAP, right? And when we look at our architecture, we usually have some kind of middleware, which the UI is talking against, and it's abstracting away the difficulties of communicating with SAP, right? Because you have all these different versions, all these different protocols. So with SAP Graph, we think that's a great step forward for eventually eliminating this extra layer. Who deliver these applications? So we're basically divided into 3 groups. First and foremost are the UI developers who use state-of-the-art technologies like UI5 Fiori, but also React web apps. Then we have, of course, the guys who implement the business logic. They do this with code and no-code platforms, like SAP Cloud Platform, of course, but we also have our own platform based on open source technology, like Node.js and MongoDB. And last but not least, that's the group that I belong to, who do the integration, right? The hard work of integrating applications from and to SAP. And we do this by using process orchestration, for instance, but also SAP Cloud Platform integration. So let me quickly introduce you the scenario, which is not very hard to imagine, because it's this customer who's returning at a bed store. Our customer Yasmin, who already received the quote the last time she visited, and this time she's ready to buy. Looking at the different personas, we see Sally, who is the sales representative, who's actually meeting the client, and she wants to be able to quickly fetch the quotes that have been offered, and also the customer data. But she also wants to interact with planning, right? So when Yasmin wants to have her bed delivered, she wants to be able to know when it's going to be delivered. And Sally doesn't want to pick up the phone and talk to the planning department first. So then we have Roger, who's responsible for planning, and he wants to be able to see which installations are done by which technicians on which dates. But he also doesn't want to be interfered too much by Sally or by customers about when is a delivery planned, when can it be rescheduled, etc. So he wants to enable self-service. Then last but not least is the customer, of course, who at any time of the day wants to be able to see when the bed is delivered and also change it. So to make all these requirements possible, we have this architecture. So basically we have an app for each persona. The first app is the sales app that Sally is using, right? The sales representative, and she's able to fetch the quotes and the customer data from SAP Graph with underneath S4 Cloud. Then we have our Cloud Foundry application, which is the planning backend, and this planning backend has some APIs for interacting with these different applications, right? So this enables the self-service in the planning backend. So we have a React planning dashboard, which is also communicating with the planning backend. And last but not least, we have the Telegram chatbot, which the customer can use to, which is part of SAP conversational AI, and is also interacting with this planning backend. So let me quickly switch to the applications. Here we have our sales rep app. It's not showing. Why? It is. Thanks. So this is a live demo. So if you would pray with me for a second. So you should now be able to see. We're now logging in, right? We're getting the token, as Jan already showed you in his demo. And yes, it's showing. Great. And now I'm able to fetch the specific quotes for our customer Yasmin. So let me just reduce this a little bit. So let's, for instance, take this quote 1300. So we're now able to plan this particular order for, let's say, the 14th of October. And when we confirm it, the quote is being patched so to SAP Graph. And there's also this API call to the planning backend, so to plan this in the technician's planning. So switching to that planning, we have that planning dashboard, right? So let me refresh this one for a second, and then log in. Yes, there it is. So here is the installation, right? So quote number 1300 is planned. So Roger is also able to filter on technicians, right? If he just wants to see, for instance, I believe this one is planned for Baron Bana, one of the technicians. So you see only his installations. Now switching to the customer perspective. So imagine Yasmin is sitting on the couch in the evening, and she wants to know when the bed is going to be delivered. So we have this SAP conversational AI chatbot, which is published to a Telegram channel. So when is my bed delivered? So the chatbot wants to know what is the quote number. This was 1300, right? And it's now scheduled on the 14th, and she wants to be able to change it because she has this birthday that she forgot. So let's say, can I change it? And the planning backend should now propose some new dates. And let's say the 21st of October. And it's now rescheduled in the planning backend. So switching back to that planning backend, it should now say that it's planned on the 21st, right? So coming back to the presentation. So what do we think of SAP Graph? So like I told you before it was quite difficult to integrate with SAP software, right? So we believe that SAP Graph is a great step forward in enabling standard applications on top of SAP Cloud solutions. What we also think is that being able to try out these APIs and being able to explore them is also speeding up development and analysis. I don't know who of you saw the Sapphire keynote this year, but Christian Klein, who is the COO of SAP and also the biggest consumer of SAP applications internally, he emphasized that being able to integrate between SAP applications should become as seamless as possible, and we believe that this is delivering on that promise. Going forward, we have this particular use case, right, in which the front end is communicating with SAP Graph backend, but we also see some other opportunities, and and this is an invitation to you, Jan, to keep on innovating and making this product even better. So thank you. If you have any questions, technical questions, we also have the people who worked on this project internally, so you can please reach out to us or Jan.
Thanks, Jeroen, for showing what. Can we get the slides? Just to wrap up. So we we believe strongly in what we're doing with SAP Graph, and since we first talked about it at TechEd, over 500 interested parties have reached out and signed up for participation in the private beta at graph.sap. While this is very exciting, we need to be very cautious. As I told you, we only have 4 objects in there currently, so just to manage expectations. But nevertheless, we want your feedback because we want to know what objects we need to attack next. And that's why we want you to reach out to us, give us your scenarios, and get in touch. With that, thank you again, Jeroen. Thank you guys for coming. Have a great TechEd. Bye-bye.